And it is my great pleasure to get to introduce the co-host and interviewer of our Live with an Author event. She has a graduate degree in journalism, upon receiving which she immediately went directly to the technology world in California and Toronto. Then she became the founding editor of theeditorial.com, and that launched her into a role at the Kennedy School, where she wrote extensively about the need to preserve local news in our country and about the importance of national news magazines. She is currently the co-host of an amazing podcast called Swing State with Tom Ashbrook, and we are so fortunate to have her as our interviewer today. Would you please welcome the incredibly accomplished Heidi Legg? Here she is.
Ian, you definitely know how to make people feel good during quarantines. Thank you, as we all sit together at home with those around us in our tribe and families. Thank you so much. I also want to do a shout out to Christine. She works tirelessly on this charity and ensuring young children have books, and she ensures that we're all here and invites us all to be part of it. So I want to give my shout out to Christine.
Yep. Well, I'm going to turn it over to you, Heidi. Thank you so much. I'll be just
yeah,
right
don't go too far, Ian.
I won't be far away.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. David Sinclair, the iconic biologist. He not only has the Order of Australia, he's also one of the top 100 thinkers in the world and on one of the top 50 healthcare experts in the world, and also a professor at Harvard in the Department of Genetics, co-director of the Paul F. Glenn Center for Biology of Aging at the Harvard Medical School. David is best known for his work on understanding why we age and how to slow its effects. In 1999, he was recruited to Harvard Medical School, and he's been there teaching biology and studying in his lab since then, for many years, 21 years. Dr. Sinclair is co-founder of several biotech companies and is on the board of several others. His approach is based on a broad view that links diseases such as cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart failure to common cellular process. And I think it's the study of the cells and the DNA that is so key today in biotech, and he's right at the forefront. His work on the development of synthetic version of Citrulline has been widely hailed as a major breakthrough and was described as Discovery of the Year by Discovery Magazine. He's been featured in 60 Minutes by Barbara Walters, one of my big icons. He's been on the Today Show. He's been everywhere. And the company he co-founded with a leading venture capitalist, Christopher Westphal, sold to GlaxoSmithKline for about $728 million in 2008. I mean, this guy has seen everything, and it's such an honor to have him here. Time Magazine in 2014 listed him as one of the most influential people in the world. His latest book is a New York Times bestseller, Lifespan, on why we age and why we don't have to. The list goes on and on. Dr. Sinclair, thank you for being here.
Hello, Heidi. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you. And it's really great to be here and an honor to be here with you tonight.
It's always amazing when I get to interview some of you visionaries, as we like to call them on the editorial. People said to me, why did you start the editorial? And I said, well, I was at home with little kids looking for low-hanging fruit as a beat. And when you start running the red line between Tufts, MIT, and Harvard, you can cross over to Boston too. We've got some great colleges over there. And of course, the Harvard Medical School. At the list of accomplishments, we are just so lucky in this city to have minds like yours. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Oh, thanks.
So what are you reading during the quarantine? What are you reading right now? What's on, we all are at home working, thinking, not all at home, essential workers, and so grateful to all the people who are helping the city work and in the hospitals, but many of us are at home. So what are you reading?
Well, actually, the moment I wake up, I'm actually reading scientific papers mainly because I have to digest all of that, and I'm helping sort through that. I'm reading a colleague's book who's about to put it out in June. So he's a scientific colleague of mine called Nira Barzilay. He's all over the TV as well. His book is called Age Later. What was the last book I read? The one that I loved reading to my kids recently. And our son Benjamin, 12 years old, is on the show. So, hey Ben, thanks for joining us.
Hi Ben.
He can vouch that one of our favorite books to read recently was about black holes. And I forget who the author is. I'm kicking myself, but It's about what it's like to have a spaceship and journey to visit black holes, and what can you learn and how time slows down. And could you send a robot into the black hole and have that robot tell you what it's like inside? And
One of the
that kind of reading.
One of the things I love about your book Lifespan, which I have to admit I have not finished, and I look forward to going through it. It's very accessible read and full of a lot of important scientific data of what's happening right now, was how you said in Australia, you really had the freedom of being a child and having this sort of time and space to explore nature. And I want to know how you feel that's influenced you as a scientist and a person and someone who thinks out of the box.
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, Heidi, I think I'll post on Twitter the name of that book and the author, so people don't have to go searching for it. But I've been really fortunate in life, just about in every way. Wonderful family and job that I love. But I also was able to, here are some funny pictures that I've sent across. So my childhood was growing up on the edge of the bush in Australia, and anyone who's read Lifespan knows that that's how I begin the book, because it really was a biologist's dream. Our house was right on the edge of the bush, and we had forests that went for hundreds of kilometers. And my younger brother and I, we would hike those valleys and stone cliffs, and go down the rivers every afternoon. And sometimes we got lost. Sometimes we had to ask people across the valley to call our mom and ask her to come pick us up. No cell phones in those days.
Right.
And so I was also inspired as a kid by my grandmother, who is pictured in that old-fashioned looking picture, that yellowish one. She's the one right in the middle with the dark shirt, not smiling. And she's a very intense person, but she taught me to have wonder for the world and never ever grow up mentally, she meant. And she used to read Winnie the Pooh to me and my brother and I. And we would listen about the philosophy of Winnie the Pooh. And of course, there's the great book, The Tao of Pooh. And she just really was of the opinion that adults screw things up, excuse my language, mess things up. And she had lived through World War II and the aftermath.
Right. She moved from Hungary to Australia, if I remember correctly.
That's right, Heidi, yeah. And so she lived through arguably one of the worst times in human history, and fled Europe to Australia, where it was enough food and jobs and everyone was in a beautiful climate. And she never went back to Europe, but she taught my brother and I about how humanity could be a lot better than it is. And she told us to do the best to make humanity what it really can be. And so I've spent really, since I was as old as this photo here on the right, I think that was early middle school, trying to, first of all, of course, please my parents and my grandmother. I'm always a bit of an overachiever, trying to get praise. My wife will tell you. But also, I want to leave the earth a better place than I found it, the way my grandmother told me to.
What is that middle photo that we can see? Looks like a drawing of two people looking over a lake or a stream.
Yeah, so in the middle is Benjamin, our son, and on the left is my father, who's 80 years old, Andrew Sinclair, and that's me on the right. And so I wanted to portray what it was like growing up, and also what some of the science was about, because words are good, but pictures, we know, especially for young readers, are even better. And so I found who I think is one of the best illustrators in the country, certainly medical illustration. And she, her name is Katie Delphia. And so Katie spent a year drawing the ideas that I had on paper. And this is just one of about 14 illustrations in the book. I think by the end of the book, she was ready to kill me, because I would say, that's not the right type of leaf for that plant. And can you change the size of the kangaroo? And that cell doesn't look like a cell. And in the end, she just said, I'm done. But we're all very proud of how the book came out, including those beautiful illustrations.
Well, I have to say, as Ian said, I wrote a paper on national magazines, and one of the great things that happened in the 20th century in media was that the great magazines hired illustrators and writers and paid them a living wage. And so one of the great things is to see some of these nonfiction adult books having these beautiful illustrations in them. So I'm glad you hired her. In my own bunker headspace, I've turned to sort of very cliche, obvious ones, not on purpose. I started with Walden by Thoreau, which actually was, harder to get through than I thought, as I was sort of stir crazy at the beginning. I'm now into Sapiens by Harari. I know I'm very late to that game, but I'm going through that. And so my headspace is there. And when I was researching you and looking into things you've done, I highly recommend people see your interview a few days ago with Ian Bremmer, the political scientist. That is also a good insight into where your thinking is. But you talk about how life will be here for 1 billion years. And I think a scientist brings that to this moment. And so how should we look at this moment in time with COVID, with a pandemic, and where should we be focusing our thinking as a people?
That's an amazing way to put this. It's always good to understand where we're going by looking at history. And because I'm an evolutionary biologist and a geneticist, we can look all the way back 4 billion years. And if you take the long view, then these short-term troubles don't seem so bad. So that's one good thing about doing that. My research says that 4 billion years ago, when life was starting to emerge on the planet, that there were protective genes, and they're in our bodies. And these are some of the reasons why exercise and dieting are good for us. But we as a species, and in my book, you'll know I've taken us through the history of humanity, a bit like Harari's book. Of course, I've read *Sapiens*.
More, because you always worry about one historian view. So I always think it's better. I mean, this is the journalist in me. You want to have a few sources, not just one.
Yeah, well, *Sapiens* was great mostly from a sociology viewpoint and politics. I've taken a biologist viewpoint, and how does biology shape our history now, previously, now, and going forward? What are we going to be as a species? And what we've learned over the last 3 months at least, is that we are resilient. We can always do things better. We should have been more prepared. Humans have very short memories, of course, that barely go back 10 years, let alone generations. But if you look at the history of the flu, which emerged at the end of World War I, they were in much worse state than we are. And, if you think we're in trouble, they had just lost 50 million people from the flu, and World War I was almost as bad in terms of deaths. And we still remember the Roaring *20s, right? So I think we're still going to think of this as the Roaring *20s to come, but the next 12 months, 18 months are going to be very different and not, something that any of us have ever experienced. There's no denying that. But going forward, the long run of the human race is an upward curve. We have this arc of humanity. I think that we live in a golden age where for most of our lives, we don't have to worry about going to war. Many of us are privileged not to have to do that. War rarely comes to us across the planet. And childhood mortality is way down across the planet. Bill Gates will tell you that. I'm a big fan of Steven Pinker's book.
I was going to say, so you're definitely an idealist, which you and I are going to be able to paint the room rose by the time we're done this interview.
Yeah. Well, longevity now was a great and rational viewpoint that if you just look at the statistics, you cannot argue that it's worse than ever. And we have to keep remembering that humanity is like the stock market, that there are these dips and sometimes some really bad ones. And there are lots of people who died during 1918 and they are today. But the long-term trend of the stock market and humanity is upward, and there's no end in sight. The types of technologies that are coming out of genetics and molecular biology, computing, they make my head spin. And I'm reading about it all the time. Even just yesterday, there was a paper that came out online that said that my friends, my co-workers, my scientists discovered that you can reverse the age of rats by 50%. Take an old rat, make it young again. Why not? That's just yesterday.
And that how does that, okay, I got a sneak preview of that when I spoke to you yesterday, but tell people how that's working. I know it's just breaking news, but found it fascinating. What's happening with that?
Yeah. Well, so in my book, I explain how it's possible that aging can be reset. We used to think aging was one direction, but we've realized that the information in our bodies to be young again, really young and healthy, is still in our bodies. Our genomes, the DNA is still largely intact. And we know this because I could take your cells, Heidi, and I could clone you, and your offspring would be healthy. This is not science fiction, this is science fact. So what that tells us is that aging is largely due to the cell's inability to read the genome, read the DNA. So we're learning ways, including in this paper that just came out, how to flick the reset switch so that the body learns how to be young again and read the DNA the way it used to when we were young. And the analogy that I like to use for at least people in our generation is that our bodies, our DNA is like a compact disc. And the information is still in an old compact disc, it just got scratched. And we're learning ways to polish that CD to get the music to play again. Now, this new study, what they found was that if you take the blood from the blood from young rats and purify it and give parts of it to the old rats for a few months, they get younger. And we can now measure the age of those animals, including humans. I could, Heidi, tell you how old you are biologically very accurately and when you're likely to die. That's now fact. And these rats, according to this clock in their cells, was 50% younger. Some of their organs went back 75%. And it's so amazing. It's hard to even believe that this is true, but I went through the data and it looks right.
Where was that study this broke? People can look it up if they're interested.
So anybody can access it. It's on a server called medRxiv, medrxiv.com or .org.
Since the mission of Raising a Reader, MA, is to end the literacy opportunity gap, including the importance of reading and the benefits of a lifetime of reading for children, I would love to talk to you just for another minute about your own childhood, because I'm very fascinated about what drives people like you, who, whether we use the 10,000 hour analogy that they always apply to Bill Gates, or whether it's just the dogged pursuit of a curious question. What else inspired you in your youth, and how did you find your path to biology? And then I want to dive into COVID a bit, but I'd like to know a little bit more about you and some of your drivers.
Yeah, actually writing the book.
Or is it just DNA? Are you going to tell me it's all DNA?
Well, I'm sure some of it's in my DNA. My father's a scientist. My mother was a scientist, so that probably helped. But really only 20% of at least our longevity and our health is genetic. The rest is how we live. I don't know why I am who I am, but I know that I was influenced a lot by my parents and by my grandmother, who were always asking questions. They had an insatiable curiosity. At the dinner table, we would talk about medicine. And so my parents were biochemists at a pathology company where they were analyzing blood and urine and feces. And they would talk about that at the dinner table. Often it was hard to eat my dinner, but that's how life was for us. We didn't talk about the weather. We talked about humans and how to make them healthier and diseases. And I just wanted to figure out how living things work. I would go in the bush and I'd see spiders and snakes and all these animals. And with some of the insects, I'd pull them apart to see how they worked. I was never very good at putting them back together, but that taught me that we still have a lot to learn about living things. And they're the most interesting thing in the universe. If you think, I don't know, some people are excited about studying rocks. Now, rocks are great, but compared to a living thing, how complicated is a rock? And that's actually the challenge. When you do biology, it's a very complicated system. We can barely understand how 3 molecules interact, let alone 26 trillion cells in the body. And so that's part of the challenge. But we have the tools now to figure this out with the genomics and the computers.
I'm only interrupting you because my phone's blowing up with people with questions for you. So I'm fascinated by the history, but we've got some real-time questions. So one of them is, you've studied inflammation, and seriously, that's one of the places that you've been looking at. We know that there's inflammation in the lungs with COVID. What can you teach us about protecting from inflammation? I read or heard you in one of the interviews when I was doing my research that you're looking at dampening the aisles of inflammation in our bodies. Can you talk to us about inflammation and any application it has to whether it's Lewy bodies and dementia or COVID in the lungs?
Yeah, so what we've learned is that there are genes in our bodies that control our health. There are a few different categories. There are three main ones. And one major category that we discovered at MIT when I was in my early 20s, and now we still work on these sirtuins that you mentioned. They are the protectors of the body, and they are turned on by how we live our lives if we're healthy. We can also turn them on with molecules such as, they're called NAD boosters. And the one in red wine that the media went crazy over about 10 years ago, that's resveratrol. These actually are proven to activate these defenses in our bodies and mimic the benefits of diet and exercise, and even better than that. And we are conducting clinical trials. Actually, here in Boston, we've done 2 years of human clinical trials already with an NAD booster from a local company here that I co-founded called Metro Biotech. But what about COVID? Now,
but wait a minute, let's go back, because you've been taking that medication yourself, if I remember correctly, that you're doing in the lab. Is that true? The
yeah,
NAD booster?
well, I do. I don't do it for, promotional purposes. I'm a scientist.
Oh, I know. So I'm curious, how's it going? You look pretty good.
Well, yeah. Do you know how old I am? I guess we should tell people so they can judge. I'm turning 51 in a few weeks, but
I'm just a few behind you. I'm 48.
yeah. Well, you're doing great too.
Thank
So
you.
we're living our lives well, and we can measure this clock. So you can't hide from aging, but we can slow it down by living well. And also, so I am taking these molecules because I know what will happen if I don't, and they're very safe.
Why, what will happen if you don't? Like, you'll just get older?
Well, just is still pretty bad, right?
I know. I've been wondering if there's something else I missed. Like,
No. I don't. I mean, our family has a history of diabetes and strokes and heart disease, so I'm on medicines for that. But no, when I say, I know what's going to happen, what I mean is, if I don't do anything, probably by the time I'm 75 or 80, I could be crippled, I could be frail, my family might have to look after me in my 80s, I might have to be spoon-fed. These are not things you would wish on your family, let alone society. So this is something I think that we all have a responsibility to do, is to stay healthier as long as possible. And that's why I'm trying to do this. I'm also a scientist trying to figure stuff out as fast as possible, because we're all born a little too early, I think, for the amazing technologies that are coming.
Let's talk about that, because you have a number of labs and you have your one big lab, but you have a number of startups, and you have a number of projects and experiments and research that you're doing right now. Can you talk to us about a few of them?
Yeah, sure. So my lab at Harvard, there's about 25, 30 of us, of some of the most brilliant people I can find on the planet.
I think we're looking at a picture of some of them with you right now on the screen.
Well, these are, this was the first cohort of people in my lab. And the one crouching is Kevin Bitterman. He's now a very successful, famous venture capitalist. And others have gone on to be faculty members. The lady in the red hat is a professor. So this is actually, I wanted to show this to show what it was like starting. I didn't know what I was doing. Nobody taught me how to run a group. I didn't know how to employ people. And it was pretty scary. I felt like I jumped out of a plane without a parachute and was just hoping that it would inflate, but it actually did. It did open, and we're still flying high. So the lab is great. It's filled with just super smart, energetic people who believe in what we all believe in my lab, which is we can make a difference. We can change the course of medicine.
Sorry, how many people in your lab, and do you cross over with George Church at all for his?
Right. So most people listening will know of George Church. Yeah, George is a dear friend. He's in my department. We collaborate with him quite often. In the latest paper that we're hoping to publish, which is actually online, you can find it, we reprogram the eye of old mice and get them to see again. make the eye young again. And
He's
George
been
was
talking about that
informed.
for a while. Wow,
Yeah.
you guys did it.
How?
I know, I'm saying, wow, you're
Oh, yeah.
there.
Well, it was pretty amazing. I have to give credit to George's lab and his people, but also I want to give a shout out to my student, Wan Cheng Lu, who just graduated a few days ago. He's now a doctor. And he was the one that took the risk and said, we're going to reprogram the eye and we're going to make my see again. And I said, well, okay, yeah, go for it. And it worked. And he admitted he thought he was going to fail up until the moment that it worked. But anyway, so there's a number of labs. There's about at least a dozen companies that I'm helping and have co-founded. Everything from vaccine companies to viral detection systems so that we don't have to grow things on petri dishes like the 19th century, and some drug development companies as well. The ability to see cells in 3 dimensions. These are the kind of things that I think are worth putting my time towards.
I apologize. It seems like I'm interrupting you. I just have so many questions coming at me. In fact, we're going to extend the interview a little bit longer, if it's okay with you, for a few more minutes and people listening in, because people would like me to make sure I get to COVID and a little bit more about vaccines and antiviral, given you are looking at those things.
Okay, I'll try to be brief.
No, it's not you. It's both of us. There's so much to cover. I said in Twitter, it would be a lot. We have a lot to cover.
Yeah. Well, so on COVID, we're starting the first clinical trial with MIB626, the NAD boosting molecule at Brigham and Women's Hospital. We're just finishing up the applications for that. And our expectation, or at least I would say our hypothesis, is that patients have low amounts of NAD and they're unable to fight the infection. The same reason why we think people get old.
Wow, so it is low levels of NAD in people who are having a hard time fighting COVID?
Well, it looks like it. My lab has done a lot of work on this before we were shuttered. And other labs have found that when they look at the tissue of the lungs of COVID patients, that there's low levels of NAD. And when you have low levels of NAD, what we and others have found is the inflammation goes crazy and the immune system starts attacking the body. And so that's probably, in my view, one of the problems with the elderly. And so if we can dampen that down, stop the coagulation and the blood clots, we'll have a much better chance of saving lives. And there's nothing right now that's saving lives as far as I'm aware.
And then what about the antivirals? Are you touching any of that, or the vaccines for COVID? Are you touching any of that?
No, not directly. My role has mainly been trying to connect people who are doing that work and making sure everyone knows who is who, and trying to distribute things like test kits and PPE for hospitals, but no, not those things.
Some people are asking as well if you could give us a little bit of a futuristic prediction game, which, you know, who's a futurist today, but you're deeply knowledgeable in the research that's out there and happening live. What do you think we can expect 3 months, 6 months, 12 months?
Yeah, well, there's lots of people working on this now. This is not some, you know, off the beaten path science anymore. And these publications that come out are in the top journals of the world. So this is the greatest time to work on aging research in biology. If anyone has kids that are interested in this, definitely encourage them to reach out to me. It's fantastic. So the future, what it looks like, it's dangerous predicting the future, as you know, but let's try. Well, slowing aging seems to be pretty easy in dogs and monkeys and in rodents. We're not that different from those biologically. And there are lots of species that live longer than us. So I think in the next 6 months, we'll have some more breakthroughs in how to reprogram the body to make it young again and how to reverse the clock. There are at least 20 companies working on medicines that tackle aging itself to stop most diseases that we know of in society, age-related diseases, which is going to be much bigger bang for the buck than trying to tackle each one individually, which doesn't lengthen lifespan by more than a few years, each one of these medicines. 10 years from now, I think we will have gene therapies, hopefully some that I've worked on, that are able to reprogram the eye. In glaucoma patients, we hope to treat the first one in less than 2 years, and we have a company to do that. We haven't announced that, but you're hearing it first.
That's breaking news. I like that.
Yep. And in our lifetimes, you can imagine, it's like asking maybe the Wright brothers, will we fly in Concords? I mean, it's going to happen. The question is, how much time, effort, money do people want to invest?
I interviewed George Church. He was my 50-second interview on the editorial because he said he was my 53rd because he said he wanted to be the Joker in a pack of cards. I was like, he was so fast. He said, I want to be your 53rd, and I missed the whole beat. But he's a funny guy. He has a very funny, dry wit. But man, that was a fascinating interview in 2014, and it's been fascinating to watch him continue with his research, and excited you're together. Ben Mesrig, who covers George Church a great deal, is asking to see your passport photo. I don't know if that's a joke or not.
I posted it actually on Twitter. Maybe Ben saw that. Hey Ben, nice to see you.
I want you to put it back up. So, and people are looking for more details about the process your lab uses, defying longevity enhancing molecules. What kind of technique or process do you think will be necessary in the future to build personalized gene therapies to target aging, which of course is the whole DNA gene editing.
Yeah. Well, it's coming already. We have a lot more information about our bodies. We have our genomes, if you want. We have these devices. I have a ring here that measures myself. I've been doing blood tests at a local company called Inside Tracker.
Slow it down. For those of us that aren't in the loop, what's on your watch? What's on your finger?
Oh, well, this is your regular Apple Watch. This one is more unusual. This is a biosensing ring that tells me my heart rate during the day, how well I slept, how much I've moved, temperature. And it tells me if I'm not doing things right and what causes me to sleep badly and sleep well. So I've been able to go from an insomniac to regularly getting a good 7 hours sleep a night. It's been life-changing.
And how has that changed? How have you done that? Because, many men post 50 have a hard time sleeping through the night. What do you think it's the drugs you're taking, or do you think it's wearing the ring? What's going on?
Well, what the ring taught me was that the NAD boosting molecule helps me get into deep sleep, and others have seen that. We've seen that in mice as well. So that's maybe part of it. The other is try to block off the screen time. And I have a whole bunch behind me of yellow tinted glasses so that I don't succumb to the blue light late at night.
And you wear those?
Oh yeah, religiously. And so
all
does
day or just before?
So around 7 p.m., my computer screen will automatically dim. I've got a program called F.lux. And actually each of my kids, Benjamin Sinclair, if you're still on, he has his yellow glasses. Before he drops off, I want to say that Benjamin is in the book. All my kids star in this book. And he's funny because he says that he wants to take over from me when I finish my lab. And I said, Ben, if it's pretty hard getting into Harvard. You may not be able to do that. And he goes, well, I can always work for some other lab like Lenny Guarenti, my mentor.
Yeah, your mentor from MIT. Yeah. Listen, RNA viruses like COVID and the flu mutate and spread to other species. Can you help us understand for the fall what you're thinking? Are you worried about the fall and a return and a stronger strain and it's spreading to animals? Just can you give us a little bit of where you're thinking in your head and how you're preparing?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not worried, but I'm keeping an eye on things. COVID-19, the virus that causes it, it's mutating at about threefold less than flu, which is good. If it was more than flu, we might have a vicious strain on our hands 6 months from now, but it's not mutating. But the problem is that I think nobody's talking about that should be, is that the reservoir is huge. It's going to be 1 billion people. And the vaccine, unfortunately, I don't think is coming anytime soon. Certainly not through safety studies. So what does that mean? That means there's a reasonable chance, I'd give it about a 10% chance, that COVID-19 could come back as COVID-21, COVID-25, and it'll be like flu. Because coronaviruses, we've had coronaviruses around for a number of years. They come back as colds every year. We don't mount strong immune responses to other.
That's why we call this one COVID-19. It's its own strain.
Coronavirus number 19. And so every year, about a third of our colds that we catch are caused by coronaviruses. And we've never been able to make a vaccine against a cold virus, right? So I think that with all the 200 vaccines in development, one is going to work at least. But even then, these viruses mutate if there's enough reservoir, which not only includes humans, but it includes cats now. Domestic cats can catch it, and minks and pangolins and tigers. So it could stay out there and change enough that it keeps coming back. Hopefully not. Again, I said only 10% chance, but that's something I'm keeping an eye on.
They're cutting us off in a minute and a half, so quick last question to end on a little bit of a higher note. Do you think we're living through a historical moment, given your understanding of history, and how big do you think it is, and how are you going to move forward in the next few months?
Yeah, I think that it could have been way worse. This is not going to even make high school history books, unfortunately. I think it's going to be a period where people will talk about it, like 9/11. Where were you when this happened? It was horrible. But compared to the world wars and 1918, I think that this is not as bad as that. I'm optimistic that we're going to be resilient in our economy, and that there aren't going to be that many deaths. We've got modern technology that will solve this. But it's hard to live through at the time. But it could have been a lot worse. We could have had a 15% fatality rate. And that virus will come, perhaps even within our lifetime. So this is a wake-up call to get ready.
Don't leave the screen. They want you and I to stay on. And since it's Raise a Reader and it's all about books, do you have another book coming out? And when can we expect it?
Well, I've never said this publicly because we haven't put out a press release, but just between us, so Matt LaPlante, my co-author, who's just an incredible guy, we really clicked. We've just signed up for at least one more book, and we're already planning on what that's going to be about.
Thank you so much, David. Wow, that was a dip in the pot. So I wish we could have had more time because there's a lot to cover. And please keep us posted on what you're doing with the lab. So people are very curious about science right now.
Will do, Heidi. This has been great. Thank you. And thanks to Raising a Reader too.
Well, and I, on behalf of Raising a Reader, and with Christine, no, come back, Christine, please.
Sorry.
We want to thank you for sure. And Christine, sorry, I'll let you speak.
Thank you. And I just am so grateful to Dr. David Sinclair. You are truly inspirational. We're thrilled to have you with us today. You did a lot of prompts to support the important work of what we do and how you have come so far in your life. And I'm sure I know a lot of it goes back to those wonderful conversations, asking all those questions at the breakfast table. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, at that time. But we're thrilled to have you. And I just want to end saying that, early literacy is the solution for, a lifetime of productive and responsible citizenship. And now more than ever, the families need the joy and comfort and escape that books provide. So please help us rebuild our rotating library so we can continue building this critical early literacy foundation. So again, thank you to Dr. David Sinclair, and Heidi did a wonderful job with such, interesting questions to really draw, so much more out of David than I ever thought we could in this short period of time. And David, thank you so much for making the world a better place.
You too. Thanks, Christine.
For sure. And I just want to follow up. Can I ask one little follow-up question? David, Sir David, Dr. David, Sir, Sir Dr. David, can you, when you think of being read to as a young person, is there one person that jumps out? Like, who read to you in your earliest memories? Is there? Yeah,
well, so my grandmother and my mother were both avid readers to me, but I think by the age of 4, I was reading enough on my own. So, but yeah, it was clear that being read to, especially more adult-ish books than I would normally read, allowed me to, my brain, I think, to just get used to the way humans talk, and to learn how to listen. That's also, I think, was really important. It's something that I think kids today struggle with.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's something that at Raising a Reader, we are trying to bring to kids. And now if I can just speak to all of you who are watching, it is only with your support that we're able to bring that to kids. And I want to specifically call out 2 incredible people. Maggie Begley has made a contribution of $500 while you are here with us today, David. And she wants to tell people that it is in dedication to her parents, who both taught her to read and the importance of education, and who both recently passed away from Alzheimer's. And so she's so happy to be hearing your talking about aging, Dr. Sinclair, because it's very timely. And also Margaret Maliki, who is a parent of one of our Raising a Reader staff people, also contributed $500. during this Live with an Author. So that means a Monday Pioneer will be following up with you on that offer to match those gifts. So thank you so much for your contributions. Please, to all of you, know that we really could use all the support possible to keep making this program available. And I want to point out that we will be gathering next Tuesday, the 19th of May, to hear Amy Cuddy be live here with us, live with the author Amy Cuddy. So we're so grateful. Again, Dr. Sinclair, thank you. Thank you all for coming to support Raising a Reader Massachusetts, and we will see you next time at Live with an Author. Would you come back for just a moment, Heidi? Because we just, if it's possible, can we bring Heidi back? Because, you know, people want to cheer for you. So if you could give Heidi and Dr. Sinclair a big round of applause. Thank you. You're amazing. And for spending the extra time, thank you.
It's really fun. Real honor to interview you, David.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Heidi. I appreciate it. And keep up the good work yourself.
Yeah, talk soon.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.